think that's it, Lisa. We are live. Thank you so much for coming on. And this is my friend. For anyone who doesn't know, on our UK channel, this is my friend, and I'd like to say peer, but I actually massively admire her for her work. Lisa Smith, author of Girl Walks Out of a Bar. And that's how we discovered you, is by reading your absolutely brilliant memoir about how you went through recovery. And obviously since then things have evolved with us, and we've got this great relationship and a lot in common where our concerns are with regard to alcohol. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. I'm so thrilled to be here with you, my friend. It has been, it's incredible to see how we have such similar issues, journeys, all of those things, you know, in such different places, and, you know, how we can all learn from what we are each doing and what everyone else is doing and share it, hopefully, so that people can understand that, you know, there's this big happy life after they put the drink down.
And it really is a big happy life that opens up so many more opportunities. And if you can just start to remove that stigma, you don't have to label yourself as being in recovery. You don't have to label yourself as an ex-alcoholic or recovering alcoholic. You can just enjoy sobriety for what it is. And I think we kind of agree on that. So it's refreshing to see that just right over the other side of the world, there's somebody holding a similar set of values. So
absolutely, absolutely, yes.
So we've been planning for a while and just waiting for the right moment, because I think this is our kind of third attempt at saying, like, is this the right time to release this? Is this the right time to do it? And we both agree that things are opening up, and there are shocking reports of figures of alcohol increase post-lockdown, and as we emerge from the impact of the pandemic, and we, I think, and fear we're starting to see a new pandemic of potential alcohol dependency. What's it like over in the States, Lisa, with figures and reports?
Yeah, I think you put it really well. There has been this pandemic within the pandemic, right? And it has been a huge increase in drinking, alcohol sales, since there were the lockdowns, which started here in March of 2020. And we're very much coming out of it now. Most things are open. We're dealing with some variant issues, as I think the rest of the world will be dealing with them over time. And, what we're seeing as we sort of come out from, our respective bunkers is that there's been a lot more drinking and a lot more problematic drinking during the pandemic. And I think that is mostly attributable to the stress. It's been a self-medicating kind of response to the incredible stress, isolation, all of these things that the pandemic brought. I was just mentioning that the American Psychological Association released a study in March of 2021, so just recently, and it found that 1 in 4 Americans overall had increased their drinking to deal specifically with stress during the pandemic. And if you narrow that scope down to parents of children aged 5 to 7, that number increased to 52%. So more than half of parents of children that between those ages started drinking more to cope with the stress of the pandemic. And that just has a ripple effect through the whole family, through the whole, community. So we're seeing a lot of it.
I mean, that I do some volunteer work for NACOA, which over here is the National Association for Children of Alcoholics. And, just anecdotally, I'm talking now, so forget even the figures, anecdotally, their calls soared from children who were reaching out during that first lockdown period from last March 2020, desperate for some support and help because their parents were drinking more. And it's a subject close to my heart, as you know, anyway. We've talked about that before. But then if I just look at I've got a 5-year-old and I'm a professional woman, and I just listen to the conversations in the playground on the school run And I can tell you just from that, and this is without judgment. I'm not saying this in a judgmental way. I've been there.
Painful. It's painful.
It is painful. Yeah. You know, and I've been there as well. I've known what it's like to wake up on Friday morning and be praying for 5 p.m. Friday night so that you can open your bottle of wine. And the conversations are very much like that. You know, the stress of homeschooling, the stress of not knowing what it's going to be like without a vaccine, the stress of not knowing what work life's going to be like, the stress of just being in a household, everybody together, and not having that daily break from the family, which is a break. As much as it's a necessity to go to work, you also get that space that's just your life, not tied with your kids. And so I can really see that. And it's interesting because the same the American, did you say
Psychological Association?
Yeah, the same. I read an article last June, and between March and June of 2020, they reported that risky drinking had doubled, and that was in that very short period. That made big news over here. I don't know about over in the States, but
I mean, what happened here, and I think this has been, I think probably you could speak to it, obviously, if you saw it there. Lot of binge drinking, which sounds a little funny, but it's actually, if you think about it, you know, I mean, I work in the legal profession and have worked in the legal profession. I'm not at a firm anymore, but you know, I always would say, and I say now when I speak to them, is that the legal profession is soaked in alcohol, right? It is in everything you do. So the way you entertain clients, the way you recruit, the way you do mentoring and bond with, you know, you celebrate your wins, you console yourself after your losses, all of those things. So there was already a lot of binge drinking that was normalized. And I should say, like, binge drinking is defined as 4 or more drinks over 2 hours for women and 5 or more for men.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're talking about a portion, like an ounce of hard liquor or, you know, 6 ounces of wine. And when we think about how we define a drink and what the amount is, that's not that much to be at a risky level, which is likely to take your blood alcohol content over 0.8%. But what you saw during the pandemic was all of this, you know, Zoom happy hours, everybody making quarantinis, right?
Yeah, the quarantini
right? A big thing. And day drinking here, at least, became a thing that was like a normal. I mean, in my worst years of going down the spiral into addiction to alcohol, day drinking was something I did. Like, you know,
yeah.
That was something the other people around me necessarily did, and I justified it in all kinds of ways. But this was really normalized, and it was not just normalized in a way that was, you know, hey, we're, you know, we're being a little gentle with ourselves here and not adhering to sort of what we would normally, you know, kind of the lines we would stay within. But it was encouraged, right? It was like, hey, the alcohol companies took full advantage of being able to say, you know, here is a way to handle the pandemic. Alcohol. I saw last fall, so probably like a year ago, somebody had posted an image from one of the, you know, big box stores, like a Costco or something like that. And there was a big sign that said back to school supplies. And it was like around this time of year. And what it was propped up on was a pile of cases of wine. You know, and it is all, this is how you parent your kids through the pandemic. You get through it, you're balancing work and parenting. So, you know, here, have a drink. That'll help you.
And it continues, Lisa, because now there are certain campaigns. I'm not sure whether they're government based or not. I think they are. But certain campaigns for, if you're double vaxxed, you will get free beer. And now we're using the beer as a reward for
absolutely
adhering to rules, basically. So, you know, it's so normalized. And what you said earlier about problem drinkers, one of the things, and I know you've seen our workplace presentation, it's massively changed over the lockdown, just because the issues have changed as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
But the opening line of what we talk about is that you don't have to have a drinking problem to be a problem drinker.
Absolutely right.
Because if you're drinking to cope with anything, whether it be stress, whether it be anxiety, or even coping with social anxiety, coping to have fun, you know, I can't have fun without alcohol. That is a form of dependency. It's very mild, but it's a form of, you're depending on it for something. And that's where the issues begin, isn't it? When you start to rely, and they're just going to be magnified now. You know, we've got this hybrid of working from home, blurred lines. The number of people that come to us now for our membership and say, I'm putting my laptop down, and the click of the laptop sends me craving for my wine, you know?
Yeah.
It's
absolutely. Yeah, it is. And what it's done, I think, is, you know, talking about sort of the knock-on effects of it, it has, you know, just sort of poured gasoline on an already burning fire, right? There was already a big issue with binge drinking, and, you know, we are in the US we see more deaths from cirrhosis of the liver than we had over the past several years before the pandemic. And even before the pandemic, more and more young people were getting those kinds of diseases, hepatitis and cirrhosis of the liver related to drinking. And this is just making it worse. And, you know, like we were talking about with the parenting thing, we saw here a spike in domestic violence. And, you know, there's a close tie frequently between domestic violence and alcohol. And, you know, you're talking about the kids reaching out to you, you know, those are the things, like everybody is impacted and, you know, somebody who is sort of on the precipice of depression or a true anxiety disorder or something along those lines, they will, you know, this kind of encouragement, this kind of additional drinking during the pandemic can cross it over. And we're seeing a lot of people who haven't had problems before struggle with mental health issues. And we're seeing people who have, you know, going back into that. It has been a very tough thing, and the isolation, and there is, you know, we talk about coming out of our bunkers. You know, we haven't seen, there's been, I know for me at the end of my drinking, it was all in isolation. Like I wanted to shut the door to my apartment, lock it, not come out for the whole weekend because I couldn't have anybody know how much I was drinking. And we're going to start seeing the effects of people who have been doing those kinds of things as we return into the workplace. And we have to have the support for them.
And the thing is with that as well, it's been enabled. That kind of isolated drinking has been enabled because of the pandemic, because we've been encouraged not to meet people, not to see people. So the support has been, I don't think the support was effective anyway, certainly not in the UK, or not enough. What is there is good, and we are trying to always improve it. But what we're seeing now is this new breed of people that have been allowed to be isolated and unsupported, and now have to come back into their normal lives and at work with a potential label attached to them. And I can't see at the moment that the work is going to be done, or the work is being done to remove that stigma. It's still very much, there's the alcoholics, and then there's the normal lot that had their quarantine, is in lockdown. And we know from experience, there's a very fine line between those two categories. It's not as clear cut. And actually those labels are what keep us stuck. Certainly for me, you know, looking across at maybe my father's drinking and other friends was what made me think I'm all right, because I'm not as bad as that. So I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not dependent. In reality, we take that kind of benchmark away, and my drinking was a problem. And that's going to emerge for people.
Yeah, I mean, here there is huge, and so much of it has to do with labels, right? You know, and now we see all kinds of paths to I don't even want to say recovery, but to not drinking, that don't have to have that label, and don't have that label. And I think that has been a very good thing here, you know, that there is there's a sober, a non-alcohol based zero proof movement here.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that, will help continue to chip away at the stigma, because the more that it becomes, and I don't know what you're seeing there so much, but for us, there's all these non-alcohol drinks that are on the market now.
Yeah.
And, the more that those drinks become normalized and that kind of alternative thing becomes normalized, the more that bars start to carry them and restaurants start to carry them. All we need to do, I really think, is in order to make people feel, supported and also welcome in those kinds of spaces, is to offer that kind of alternative.
Yeah.
And as we're coming out of that, and the more we do that, the more normalized not drinking alcohol can be. I'm sober 17 years. When I walked into, when I got sober, it was 12-step or nothing. There was nothing else. There wasn't Instagram. There wasn't, other recovery based program, other recovery programs that were readily available. There was no, for me, that was where I got support and fellowship. That's where I had friends, because I didn't know anyone else in the world who didn't drink, right? Like, I had no sober references. But now, if somebody's choosing to not drink for whatever reason, religion, they're training for a race, they're just doing dry July, they're supporting someone who is doing a sober spring, whatever, they're choosing not to drink. And if that person can just go out and be, there's no difference between someone like me who had to stop drinking because it was going to kill me, and the person who's just choosing not to drink tonight and is like, you know what, it's Tuesday, I don't really feel like drinking, I'm going to have that non-alcoholic thing tonight in the bar. Then, it becomes, that's what we have to normalize.
Absolutely, and at the moment it's so the opposite way.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was watching a Louis Theroux documentary last night, and it was so, you could see the sympathy in his eyes for these people that had become dependent on alcohol. And it is, it's very sad. We know what it's like, but it was still very much, this is how I drink, I'm normal, and this is how you drink, and you're an alcoholic, that kind of impression. And we have to remove that, because if you look now at, like you say, the alcohol-free options, for example, they're for anyone to access for whatever reason. It's like having, I think Millie from Sober Girl Society said that choosing to drink non-alcoholic things is like having a fake Christmas tree. You still get to join in with all the celebrations and be part of it.
Exactly. That's a great way to analogize it. And nobody else, but it also has the benefit of, like, if you want to keep it to yourself, nobody has to know what's in your glass.
Exactly. And I think that's part of it, isn't it? That belonging. That it was interesting. England just maybe you don't know over there, but England just got to the final of the UEFA.
Yes.
Okay, so on
and
Sunday there was you know what? They played a great game, I have to say, and they were amazing. So we're very proud of our team. But that aside, the drinking was so centered. People were drinking from very early in the morning on both the semi-final day and the final day. And, the West Midlands Police Force published figures to say a 47% increase in the number of reported alcohol-related domestic abuse cases on days when the England team won, and an 18% increase on days after an England match, whether they won or not. So there's all sorts of figures. Again, this is not to do, they compared it to those that didn't drink, where there was no increase. So as you were touching on before, this is all about alcohol fueled violence, the impact on society, the impact on the cost to the forces for these people, let alone the damage that's done to families, and potentially very violent crimes happening because of alcohol. My point was, though, for the first time ever, and I'm not saying it's never happened before, but I certainly only noticed it for the first time ever, the adverts between the halves and in between the extra time were advertising alcohol zero alcohol alternatives. And I thought, wow, what a movement. This is finally happening.
Yes, and it's happening at the same time that the alcohol companies are appropriating typical non-alcoholic drinks like seltzer and making them hard, like that, some of that stuff, it sounds, awful to me. But yes, normalizing it. That's what it is. And when we talk about the workplace, it is the same thing for, we know there's a lot of statistics out there that talk about the dollar figures that can be attached to lost productivity for businesses, based on workers being out sick with a hangover, hungover, in the job, having to take leaves, having an accident, drunk, and having to be out on a medical leave, all kinds of things, that cost the workplace. And when we talk about coming back into we can almost now like do a reset on how we think about coming out of the pandemic. That's why I think offers this huge opportunity for employers as well as restaurants, bars. I mean, the other thing, my friend Tawny Lauer and I have a podcast called Recovery Rocks, and
which is amazing, by the way, just to drop that in there. It is amazing, and I love Tawny Lauer as well.
Yeah, she's awesome. And the thing that she always says is like, and she's so right on this, is all of these restaurants, bars, all of them, they're missing out on a huge opportunity when all they offer someone like me or like you is a diet soda or seltzer with a splash of juice in it. I will, when I go out, I'm not going to buy an expensive cocktail under any circumstances because I don't drink. But would I spend more to have, one of these really cool non-alcoholic, not even like mocktail, just 0 proof, really creative concoctions with new things that are in the market? Yeah, I would. And people would I do it now. There are, where I live in Southern California, many of the restaurants here have entire sections on their drinks menu of 0 proof. Yeah. And if I see a restaurant that has that, I will always order one to support it, because, it's good for everybody. And I think if employers can try to be aware of that and have that reset mindset as we come in, de-emphasizing, alcohol overall in all these events, but also, it reminds me of a story when I was still at a law firm. We did this was a few years ago, we did a big 100th anniversary party for the law firm. And we had it at the Rainbow Room in New York City, which is a really like fancy as we did at any event, a signature cocktail, right? We did a pomegranate margarita that you could get as you were walking in. And we did, because it's, they had to deal with me for so long, signature mocktail, which was a virgin mojito. But we used to always have that at the bar. But instead, we put it on trays and had it out for people. And the event was on a Tuesday night. And we were shocked at how many people grabbed the virgin mojito. And people said to us, they were like, oh, thank you for having this. I wanted to come. It's your big party. And I felt like I had to have a drink. But being able to grab this instead is, and still feel like I'm having a celebration is great, because after this, I've got to get on the commuter train home, and I'm doing homework with my kid, and it's Tuesday night. Not everybody drinks on Tuesday night.
Exactly that. And when you look at the statistics on that as well, just you were talking about hangovers at work prior to lockdown. So there's no figures on this at the moment, but they're going to be higher. They are going to be higher. 89,000 people per day in the UK were missing work because of alcohol related absence, whether that be hangover or still under the influence.
Exactly.
89,000 people per day in loss of productivity. We now have to look.
Should take note.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at this, if these people are now working from home, us people, I'm talking people just like me, normal drinkers. I'm not talking about, your high risk alcohol dependent people, because, I know I wasn't a normal drinker, but I thought I was at the time. So normal drinkers who are missing work because of hangover, that doesn't even take into account the people that are missing work because of the long-term health problems, the diabetes, the heart conditions, the high blood pressure. That doesn't even take that into account. So if we can do something,
even just now about the cancer, the uptick in alcohol-related cancer.
Well, there's 8 different types of cancer minimum that are directly caused by alcohol, and yet we still don't label the bottle with it being a carcinogen like we would do on a cigarette packet.
It's true.
Now, it needs a public health warning on it, and it certainly doesn't need to be given out with a public health warning as a freebie. So yeah, I think we there's lessons to be learned, but there are things for getting policy that employers can just do, like you said. At the work party, offer the alcohol-free alternative menu. Not only will that increase the kind of, or decrease the stigma and allow people to feel involved who choose not to drink or who can't drink, but think of that culturally and in terms of diversity. You will get a bigger uptake of the work event because all of a sudden you're including people who choose not to drink for religion.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's huge. It is absolutely huge. And what we're not saying is take alcohol off the menu. We're saying
never. No, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Absolutely not. No, because, you know, most people can drink safely when they choose to.
Yeah.
You know, and it is just a matter of providing alternatives for those who cannot drink safely, but more broadly now recognizing that there are people, you know, who are choosing not to drink for a myriad of reasons.
Yeah, I think as we move out of this as well, one of my biggest concerns, apart from the overall increase in alcohol uptake, is the impact this has had on women. And I know we touched on it at the beginning, but here in the UK, I read something to you before that's like a 41% increase in women who are becoming dependent on alcohol. And let's not forget, and I'm not into, or I'll be honest, I'm not into saying women this and men this and labeling us all into boxes. But if we look at the role that most women have had, or many women have had in this pandemic, as the mother, the homeschooler, the employee, there's been a lot of demands, and those demands have now increased further. What frightens me, Lisa, and it really does, and I think fear is the right word, is that our services, I don't know how you are over there, but our services are so overstretched and underfunded. There's potentially no place for high dependent drinkers to go.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be just treating the end result. There are preventative things. You touched on it earlier, the social media, you know, even our kind of thing where we've got a membership for your people who choose not to drink, making friendships, connection being the opposite of addiction, all of that kind of idea behind it. There are places where you don't have to wait until you feel like you need help to choose sober.
No, you can find community in all kinds of places. I mean, that has been one of the real gifts of, you know, there's a lot of evils that go along with social media, but one of the gifts is the connection. I wouldn't know you. Yeah.
Absolutely not.
I mean, it just has expanded the universe of opportunity for, you know, places that people can reach out to however they're comfortable and whenever they're comfortable. You can be anonymous, you can, you know, if you want to, in so many of these communities, or you can be, you know, together in person.
Yeah. And as you know, we do the social meetups in as many towns as we can across the UK. So yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about it. What we found is, you know, there's so many people for different reasons. We have got people who've done 12 steps, and we have got people who class themselves as being in recovery, but we've also got those people that just say, you know what, I was just sick of the hangovers.
Yes. Yeah. I'm choosing, you know, when I went into detail in my book about, you know, how far down it went and all of that. And so what I meant for it to do was to, you know, sort of document my thinking throughout that descent so that somebody might identify with where they were along, you know, maybe going, oh, I think like that sometimes, and see it as a red flag and sort of take that. Yeah. But, you know, sometimes I have people talk to me and say, yeah, I really thought it was a drinking problem, but then I read your book and I'm like, I'm not as bad as her. I'm like, no, that's not the point. Like, the point is that it is a progression, and it is a painful, miserable, dark progression. And if you're seeing signs that of certain kinds of thinking or certain kinds of, you know, of a certain relationship to alcohol, that maybe it is time to, you know, you have time to get off that
get off the train,
train
absolutely.
before it goes all the way into the station. And I think that's what it is. People are instead of saying, do I have to stop drinking? More people are looking at it and going, what is alcohol adding to my life? How is alcohol, what's so good about alcohol that, it's worth the hangovers, that it's worth the missed days of work, or that it's worth on that progression? More people are saying, you know what, look at all these options for not drinking alcohol. I'm going to check out some of that.
It's so interesting that, because I one of the things, again, I'll come back to the workplace presentation, and I want to talk about that with you in a second as well. One of the things that I say about that is no one I've ever met ever said, oh, you know what, I'm going to become an alcoholic. We all were normal drinkers at one time, right? And I think that we were all normal drinkers. We may have been slightly more excessive on a weekend than others, but we were very much in the normal drinking camp at one point. And I think that's hugely important, because if you stop thinking about everybody as an us and them, you can intervene and you can look at yourself and think, and this is a great question, I think, to ask, has my relationship with alcohol changed? And I think that's all you need to ask, because like me, what I found was I used to drink on a Friday with friends in the pub.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of my drinking, and I'm going to compare Friday for Friday, I was sat at home marking work alone, drinking wine to cope with stress.
Yeah.
So when you see that kind of emotional switch where I'm not a social drinker anymore, because I'm not even going out doing it. I'm doing this on my own because I feel like I can't cope with the reality of my life. Right. Even something that small should switch the lights on and make you think, hang on, do I need to take a break? Do I need to stop altogether? Do I need a little reset? Get some rules around it at the very least, and don't break your own rules.
When you see that change, when you say like, gee, I frequently speak of it in the same terms. Like when people ask, how do I know if I have a problem? And, I think it's always a matter of, or how would I know if I had a problem down the road? Like, look at whether your behavior and your drinking changed. And if it changed, ask yourself why, right?
Yeah.
Are you in the bar 4 or 5 nights a week now, where you used to go 1 or 2 nights? If so, is it because you just like the bar that much more, or are you trying to shut something down in your head, right? Like where you used to be like a couple drinks and go home, now do you just like drinking a greater volume of alcohol now than you used to? Or is something underneath that, some stress, some depression, some anxiety? What are you feeling that because it tends to be self-medication at that point. Yeah. It's not that you're like, but I just really love this wine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you get honest with yourself and you take that back, don't allow yourself to stigmatize yourself either. And that's really important, because, let's face facts, alcohol's addictive. We don't sort of blame the person for being addicted to any other substance. We don't label them a tobaccoholic or a heroinaholic. We don't, we say it as it is. Well, heroin's addictive. If you take it, you're going to get addicted. It's the same with alcohol. So if you're going to take it and then start to emotionally depend on it, at some point you are going to be emotionally reliant upon it.
That's right.
And eventually physically reliant.
And then you become physically reliant on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think? Are you still offering your workplace presentations over there, Lisa?
I am. Yeah, I do. And it's specific to the legal profession primarily. And so really a lot of what it is just raising awareness of hey, there is, in the studies that have been done here, more than 20% of practicing employed, working lawyers have a substance use disorder, typically alcohol use disorder. That's 1 in 5. And, when you look at sort of some of the associated problems, really high levels of depression, anxiety, that feeds into it. That was me. I drank to get rid of that with the stress of the job and with, my other underlying things. I had a genetic predisposition. My grandfather died from it. And I had at the time an underlying and undiagnosed mental health disorder of major depressive disorder I was diagnosed with when I got sober, and anxiety. And then you added in the stress of like this crazy life I started out as an attorney, as a corporate finance attorney in a giant law firm. And that was when it became too much. I became a nightly drinker as a first-year associate of the law firm. So, so I talk about raising that awareness, but then also what can we do to change it? And a lot of it is, destigmatizing things, encouraging, like we like to think of it as a culture of help seeking, right? You don't have to talk to me about it I'm your manager. You don't have to talk to me about it. You don't have to do whatever, but know that we are, you can go onto our wellness page or whatever it is and find all these resources. You can call our employer assistance program, find all these resources and talk to somebody confidentially and for free. That I'm not going to know about this, but I do encourage you, if you need it, to go get it. And, I think it's incumbent on managers of people, when you're taking your people out to celebrate, or when you're doing any kind of work-related events, are you making sure that you're creating an environment or going into an environment with alternatives? Like I said, go to the bar if you want to, but make sure that you're going somewhere where everybody's comfortable. There are enough alternatives, and, there should never be a pressure put on drinking. I hear that a lot, that attorneys feel like, well, I feel like I have to drink, everybody's drinking. That's got to be addressed by the profession.
And you know what, it's not only law, because there's been other studies done, and actually Cosmopolitan magazine, just to name drop, did this big article which we complained about, and it said evidence suggests that intelligent people drink more, but it was done in a way that it was kind of cool to drink more because that meant you were intelligent. The report actually showed that, generally speaking, people with higher academic qualifications tend to go into more stressful positions in the workplace, therefore tend to drink more to deal with the stress and cope.
Yes.
And I checked out some figures actually today to add to our presentation, and government figures in the UK say that depression, stress and anxiety rank top in reasons for being absent from work. Top. Yeah. So add alcohol to that, because people aren't learning how to cope with these mental health disorders, number one, and number two, and more importantly, don't always know they've even got one. And that was me. I didn't know that I had anxiety and depression until after I stopped drinking and found that actually I was a nervous wreck. And that's what I'd been masking.
Exactly it.
Yeah. So it's really important. And I think the biggest thing we can do here, and for me, the biggest thing, as well as the other things we talked about, is let's start challenging those conversations in the staff rooms that normalize the drinking culture.
Yeah. As a manager, don't come in talking about how you shut the lights out in the bar all night on Saturday night to your people.
Absolutely. And when you do hear it, if somebody's saying, oh, I can't wait till Friday, I'm so stressed, I'm going to go and have a drink, don't be afraid to sort of say, oh, why are you feeling so stressed? What's going on? What else do you do to relieve stress? Do you have any healthy strategies to relieve stress? Let's get people thinking about how they're using alcohol, and talk about healthy alternatives, mindfulness practice, gratitude, affirmation, exercise, meditation. Sleep. There's no shame. Sleep, absolutely sleep. Oh, don't get me started on sleep, Lisa. It's one of my favorite topics.
I'm a big advocate for taking naps.
But you know what? Again, if we look at sleep, alcohol reduces your melatonin production, so you don't naturally fall asleep easily.
Terrible.
And it decreases the number of sleep cycles that we have, so you're not getting good quality sleep. If you deprive a rat of sleep for a few days, they die. Yeah. And yet and it takes 10 days for this to get out of our system. So even if you're a weekly drinker, you're having poor quality sleep within the time before your next drinking cycle starts. So
totally,
let's look at that. Even if we're saying to employees, as a workforce, let's have a 30-day sponsored sobriety, you're going to get some productivity increases as a natural byproduct.
Yeah, if people decide to buy into it, sure.
Yeah. So I've got nothing else to add to it. I think this is like perfect and what people really need to hear right now.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
And thank you. And I know you're kind of saying you're doing the law firms and so on in workplaces, but you are on LinkedIn and people can find you on LinkedIn if they want to connect and know a little bit.
Yes, I'm at lisasmithadvisory with an O.com. And I'm on social media at Girl Walks Out. And yeah, so it certainly I'm available if anybody has questions or wants to connect.
And likewise over here in the UK, if anybody wants to find out about our workplace presentations, just visit the website www.besoberofficial.com, and you should be following us on social media if you found us here anyway, I would have thought. So yeah. So it's been lovely chatting to you, Lisa. Thank you. It's been a long time coming.
Same. Thank you, Alex. We'll talk
really
soon.
Enjoyed it.